Welcome to Investories, a podcast about real stories, real estate, and taking real action. Join hosts John Hooper and Kyle Robertson as they talk investing, mindset, and taking that first step. We all have a story. What's yours? The Investories Podcast.
Booyah! Welcome.
Booyah! Did you like that? No? Too
Yeah,
weird?
was
it weird?
Good.
Nah, it's kind of...
Too weird, strange. Tell us. Anyway, but booyah. Welcome to Investories Podcast with me, John Hooper, and my co-host.
Hi, I'm Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah, how's your week?
It's been really good, man. Not bad at all. It's over, so that's a good thing.
It's over already? It's Friday tomorrow, isn't it?
Is it? God, see? Okay. It's Friday tomorrow. I had no idea. I thought today was Friday, to be perfectly honest with you. But yeah, I guess it's Thursday. But it's been good. It's
we're peaking.
What's that?
We're peeking people behind the curtain.
Yeah.
When we record.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway.
No, I don't really. We've got some business stuff to take care of this weekend, so it's almost like weeks just run together anymore. You know, we don't really have weekends so much, but
I feel you on that.
You know, everything's closed, like banks and businesses, so you can't really do business so much, which is a good thing. It's kind of a plus. But we planned this weekend to be full of some business stuff, so it's just going to run right to next week.
Nice.
That sounded really
cool.
negative, didn't it? I didn't mean for it to sound so.
Yeah, it did sound a bit.
Yeah, sorry. No, I'm excited. This is good. Can't wait for the weekend.
I got to do taxes stuff, so that's not fun either. But I went to Disneyland last week. Took the little one on my own and rode Mickey's Runaway Railway.
How's that?
Game changer.
Game changer.
Yeah, it's great.
Wow.
You go on a little train. It spins around. There's like animation and it's basically like, I don't know, taking some hallucinogen and watching a Disney cartoon.
Did you take immersion. A hallucinogen, John? Come on.
No, I didn't. But I did have a lot of popcorn, so there's quite a lot of sugar in there.
That's about the same.
So maybe it was the popcorn kicking.
Yeah.
Anyway, we digress. Hey, tell us what you like. Tell us what you think. Tell us that you like our new format, the Investories format of 3 episodes a week. We are going to post a full episode every Friday as well, so if you're into our full episodes every Friday, you can still get that. But we've sliced our content. We're being more mindful of kind of what you guys want to listen to, so please do feedback and tell us that you love it, or hey, you should think about this, or hey, fire your producer and get a new one. That's fine too. Hit us up on Investories Pod on Instagram and TikTok, and we're also on YouTube, so search for us. I don't know how to link to YouTube, but we'll put a link in the bio to the show notes. Sorry, not in the bio. Anyway, this week we've got Austin. Austin is an investor based in the Bay Area. He is an absolute machine of seller financing. Hey, so continuing our creative finance theme, but he also does the back end of that, which is lease options. So we dive into kind of lease option strategy, all that good stuff. It's kind of an amazing, if not quite a long interview, but so much content, so much value. What do you think, Kyle? I think we kind of explored a lot, but I feel like we scratched the surface.
We barely scratched the surface, and you know, Austin really kind of gives everybody the keys to the castle here. He really does tear down his entire operation and how he does things, both on the purchase side and then on the sales side, which we haven't had anybody on that really gives that much information. And not only that, but stay tuned to the very end of this, because at the closing minutes of the episode, Austin will actually tell you how he does this. I mean, I'm talking nuts and bolts discussions with real estate brokers, on-market deals, things that, you know, his method of doing things and the psychology of how you get people to talk to you, especially when there's an intermediary like a real estate broker, because that's really difficult in seller financing, is to deal with an intermediary. It's a lot of people who preach this type of thing want to be direct to a seller. He talks about and gives you some really good pointers on how to do that when you're dealing with a real estate broker. So definitely listen all the way to the end. Or if you're not on Friday, listen to whichever part of this week that this episode will come out, so you can hear.
It'll be Wednesday,
or at least listen on Wednesday so you can catch that piece.
Yeah, and the other piece that I really connected with is Austin's kind of what I'd call a North Star, and kind of the why, and how he got started and the reason he does what he does. And it's quite noble and really kind of exciting and really interesting to hear that process and people's as someone kind of pulling out those goals and figuring out a way to help people. And that's throughout the episode. As Kyle said, there's so much content here that you can get value from. And without further ado, here's Austin. Welcome to Investories, Austin Largusa. How's it going, Austin?
I'm doing well if I can figure out how to unmute my mic.
Yeah, that's kind of key to the broadcast, right? Is being able to
That button's
that one button. Yeah, I mean, I struggle with the record button as Carl will attest to, and
it's hilarious. Yeah.
Yes, he gets frustrated when I don't hit stop recording for about 10 minutes, and we will sit there in silence, looking at each other, going, "It's here somewhere. It's here somewhere." Anyway, Austin, thank you for joining us. Austin, your company is Simple Real Estate. People can check out the website simplerealestate.com, and we connected through my mastermind group and the group of investors I meet with on a regular basis, and you came and spoke to us and spoke with so much knowledge and grace and humbleness that we had to get you on the podcast and talk some more. So can you give us kind of the broad strokes of your early stages into the investing journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for letting me jump on and share what little I know. Here's my hope, John and Kyle, is that something I say somehow connects with one of your listeners just to help them take the next step. We got started in 2019, my wife and I, and our journey in real estate actually started with what was probably the most crushing moment of our lives as a married couple and as parents. And so my wife was getting ready to give birth to our third son. This is 2019. And we thought, more kids, you have to have a bigger house or a bigger living area. And so we tried to apply for a house. And because my wife was going on leave and we didn't know if she was going to return to work, we actually didn't get our mortgage application approved because my income wasn't enough. And so we just thought, we live in America. It's supposedly the greatest country on earth. Like, how in the world are we being told, no, we can't buy a house? And so what I did, if you're around me for any period of time, you'll know I'm hyperactive. I move. It's very rare that I sit still and be sad. And so what I did was I went to Google, like every good millennial, and I asked Google, how many people were denied mortgage applications in 2019. And the data actually shows you that 11% of all mortgage applications in America were denied. Perspective, that's 1.6 million applications. Even deeper perspective, 1.6 million families were told, no, you cannot buy a house in America, which is insane to me. And so that's what started our journey. We said, well, there has to be a way to buy real estate or sell real estate without having to go through a bank directly. And that's where we got started on creative financing. What's crazy, and most people don't know, is that real estate used to trade without banks. It's literally how real estate used to trade, more commonly in the Midwest, the South, and the Southeast. But real estate used to trade without banks. And so I went, Google, I asked Jeeves, how can we buy houses without banks? And I started my journey in learning creative financing. And so what we did was we got all of the knowledge that we needed just to take that first step. And then we formed our company, Simple Real Estate. And our mission statement is to help 1,000 home renters become homeowners over the next 25 years without banks.
That's a big goal. I love that. And, I have been in that position, being denied for a mortgage. And there's almost that feeling of, I hate to call it shame, but it's like
100%.
It's a defeated feeling. It's just, how in the world do you dig yourself out of this hole? Home ownership is really high on the list for most common Americans out there because you really feel like you're living the American dream. How do you do it without that, that white picket fence? Because you don't even own the white picket fence if you're a renter, right? And it's like you want to own that thing, and it's so frustrating when you get that no. So you got this big vision, which is huge, and everybody needs to have with big goals. But how did you guys overcome the issue of having your own place in 2019? Of not having your own place, excuse me.
Yeah, so here's what's funny is we started this journey in real estate and we bought a bunch of rentals and we're placing families and we don't even own the house that we live in. we're still renting. We're
No
renting. So we're helping other people become homeowners while we're hanging out over here saying, you know what, renting's fine for now. We'll figure out our time and our season to buy a house. But for right now, we're just going to help people as much as we can.
That's brilliant. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's
Okay.
it's so funny because there's this. We haven't talked about this for quite a while, John, but there's this this group of people who are, will argue that renting is actually better than owning. You can be a real estate investor and rent a house, and then all of that headache goes away on your side, and you can just focus exclusively on your business. And I can totally see that as being a goal for a lot of people. I don't see that as being a problem whatsoever, especially if you got a good vision for what your real estate business on the investing side is supposed to look like. Do you guys have plans to end up buying a house, or are you pretty comfortable the way that you're living now?
Yeah, I mean, we don't mind the renting aspect. If you consider, I'm not handy to begin with. So if anything goes wrong in my house, if I owned it, I would just hire out a subcontractor. So it's the same thing right now with the property management company. I just call them.
And I think we've talked about this before, and I totally get it. I think what the difference is, right, and the difference of your mission is that it's the option, right? The option is to go and buy a house if you want to, and figuring out a way to do that. I owned a property in the UK, or I still do, but I didn't live in it at all. I just rented it out, but I knew I wanted to have that money going to bat for me, and I also wanted the flexibility of being able to live where I want, again, phoning someone when something breaks, all that good stuff. So I think that's the kind of view of my approach to it, and kind of aligning to that. And it's also market dependent, right?
Well, and to consider, right, I'm in the Bay Area in Northern California. And if I wanted to buy a house right now at, 6.5% of $1 million house, it just doesn't, the numbers just don't make sense. Now, what's beautiful, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this a little more, is we're actually working on buying a house right down the street from where we live, where we'll be able to take over a 2.7% interest loan and not have to go through the bank. And so there are ways, but for right now, we're fine, man. I like renting.
Can you repeat that again, the loan piece?
Yeah, we're working on I know, because it's like more than double, or it's a ridiculous rate. But there is a house that has a 2.7% interest rate right down the street, where the seller has to sell because of work, and we're gonna get into it with very little money down, and without having to get our own mortgage on the home, and just paying that 2.7% interest on the original purchase price that she bought it for. So it's going to be, it's going to be pretty much the same amount we're paying for rent, except we're in a brand new construction house that was just built last year and has like almost a quarter acre of land for my kids to get all their energy out. So, I'm sure we can talk about the terms a little more.
And I'd like to spin it back for a second. Sorry, Kyle, just in terms of when you're sat there looking at Google and trying to figure out how you're going to attack this problem. One of the things we talk about a lot is like mindset. What did you have to kind of change your thinking? Is this kind of a characteristic of just who you are? What was that process?
Yeah, 100% mindset is, that was everything for me. I'll tell you, I grew up in a family where no one in my family has ever bought a house. Like, no one, right? No one in my family has even ever gone to college. For me, basically, if I graduated from high school on time, like that was an achievement in my family, right? Like my family dropping out of high school, failing classes, right? And having a really low ceiling of what they thought they could do and their potential. And so it was actually a challenge for me. It was a challenge for me to even get the guts to go apply for a mortgage. Like that in itself was scary and intimidating. And then obviously, all right, you get to this place where it just crushes you that you can't buy a house. And then I think what really shifted for me, John, was having to look at my wife and tell her that I couldn't buy our family a house. That changed everything for me. Having to look at my oldest two boys, knowing, and they don't care, they're too young to even realize what's going on, but I just knew in that moment that I wasn't able to provide for them was crushing, dude. Like I felt, you guys know, men already, we tend to feel a sense of insecurity and inadequacy as husbands and as fathers, especially. And so to have someone who's not even in my family tell me, no, you're not good enough to buy a house. I was like, dude, what? And so what it was for me, honestly, John, was it was kind of like I can be sad for a moment. And I think it's important, especially as men, that we understand like there are emotions and we can handle those emotions. But at the end of the day, you have a responsibility to provide for your family, right? And it's not your sole responsibility, but you have a responsibility. And so my mindset at that point, it's weird how it just shifted, was, all right, Austin, get your big boy pants on and let's figure it out. There's a way, let's figure it out. I'm naturally wired to be a big problem solver as it is. And so this was easy for me. It wasn't difficult to find out how to do it. What was difficult was for me to get the courage to say, all right, Austin, get back up. You had a little hit, but you can do it. Keep going. Don't give up. It's going to suck again, but next time it's just going to suck less. And so that was the biggest mindset shift for me. Was not figuring out how to do it. It was just overcome. You just got to overcome.
And it's honestly, for a lot of people, it's one of the toughest things to overcome, right? Because I can relate to you on that. You know, I almost feel like I thrive when I have a problem that I need to solve. When I don't have a problem I need to solve, I do stupid stuff. You know, I start doing self-destructive things, you know, things that I just get bored. I'm like, all right, what else can I go out and do? You know, there's no focus, there's no nothing. And it kind of almost relates back to goal setting in a way. You know, it's like maybe your goal isn't whatever this problem is you're trying to solve, but now you've got a new goal. And now that goal can really light your fire and start moving you in the direction that really satisfies your soul. It took me so many years to learn that. And sometimes people have to learn that about themselves the hard way by facing some kind of hardship. Instead of just setting goals, you have a problem you have to solve. Now you're going to really see what you're made of. And I think that's what you've done. I'm curious, you know, you were facing this issue and kind of the flame that sparked this fire for you ended up being that you were denied for a mortgage. How did that shift over into thinking, okay, well, I don't need to just help myself and my family. I want to help other people do this as well. Why was it that you shifted into that mindset?
Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you for asking that. I think me understanding the data behind mortgage applications, approvals, denials, and just kind of going down that rabbit hole was eye-opening and like heartbreaking. You've got to consider how many applications were denied. 1.6 million families were told that they can't buy a house. Now, I know myself well enough to know that, you know, if there's something that I need to do, I can figure it out. I'm a problem solver. But a lot of people don't own homes because they're just uneducated on what options are available to them. And so when we saw that there was opportunity to help people and that there were so many people who needed help, I said, all right, let's just try it. Let's see what we can do. Here's some, I do a lot of personal coaching, and here's one thing I teach a lot of is this. If the vision you have for your future only has room for yourself, it's not a future, it's a failure. It's actually pathetic. Our resilience as humans is so high that we ought to take every opportunity we have to help someone. Literally, if whoever's listening on this podcast, if you guys zoom out for a second and try to identify one opportunity that you have every day to help someone, you're going to start seeing that there's actually more opportunities, and it doesn't take a lot. It's not like it doesn't take a lot of your time. It doesn't take a lot of your resources. A lot of us can help other people with like minimal effort just based on our experience and our knowledge. And so for us, it was, we have experience in building businesses. We have experience in managing people. I have experience in sales. I don't have experience in buying a house, but that's an easy skill to learn. Let's use everything we have and let's just help people. At the end of my life, I want to know that I didn't spend it just gathering and accumulating wealth and goods and treasures. I want to know that at the end of my life, I made a difference. I made an impact in someone else's life.
I think that's a really just cause, and that's something I've been going through lately. Is that exact thought process of like I was fixated on a number, and actually that's not the way forward. The way forward is, how do I add value? How do I help? Hopefully, Investories helps people. Kyle, do you think maybe?
I love it. I will say
course.
this too. I think what you said, you're looking for a number. Here's something that I think is the most cheesy and most corny thing in real estate investing. I don't know if you guys are on social media, but there's this trend going around for real estate investors where you put how many doors you own in your bio and like you advertise it and market it to make you sound like some very like glorified real estate investor. That is so corny. Like it's so cheesy. Honestly, nobody cares. If that's literally the only vision you have for your real estate journey, I honestly think that's really sad. I think it's really sad that your whole goal and intention is to add another door on your Instagram bio when you could be doing so much more for people.
That's a big point, and that's a really good point, because there's just so many people out there who think that they're essentially real estate investing has become their identity so much. And this, I'm not trying to knock any syndicators or people who raise money or anything, but they think that that's going to give them more credibility. Like, oh my gosh, Kyle has 300 doors. Well, of course I'm going to give him my money. It doesn't work that way. I mean, anybody who's a halfway savvy investor is going to look and see, am I a good operator? Am I somebody who is actually have I gone full circle on a deal? Have I been able to return my investors the capital that they put into my deal and then some? That's the things that matter. It doesn't matter how many doors or how many tick marks you have next to your name. I love that. That was a big piece. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think again, and another metric, a better metric is like return on investment, right, for investors, or lives changed or something like that. So I really like that. In terms of, excuse me, losing my voice. In terms of learning kind of the next steps, and I guess the seller finance piece, what did that journey look like? And I think we focus on that first, and then the kind of lease to own output of that. I think that's really interesting to kind of get those two input output pieces.
There's that darn mute button again. Can't figure it out. Jeez.
And you've used this before, Austin. There's no excuse.
have. This is terrible. This is like amateur hour. Jeez. Going back to the education piece, I will say this because I want to help someone on this podcast who maybe thinks that like they'll never get there. I was a terrible student. I was actually an absolute terrible student. I graduated from high school. This is crazy. My GPA was 1.16. That was my graduating high school GPA, which you shouldn't graduate from high school with that GPA. And so I went to college. I'm a college dropout. I never finished. I never got a degree. So I want to start there, just in case anyone's listening and they're like, well, I don't have my MBA and I don't have a degree in accounting or finance. I don't have a degree in entrepreneurship or with a focus or an emphasis. That doesn't mean anything. I literally was a terrible student. But what I did and what I'm good at is being resourceful. And so here's what I would do. I work a full-time job. I'm married. I have 3 kids. I would go through my whole workday and segment every part of my day to fit in as much education as possible. And so here's what a day would look like for me. This is insane. I still wake up at 4:10 a.m. It's literally on my phone, my alarm clock, 4:10. I coach CrossFit from 5 to 6. I get home at 6:15. From 6:15 to 7 a.m., I'm either watching a YouTube video, I'm journaling, or I'm doing some kind of learning, some kind of learning that's actionable. At 7 o'clock, when my kids wake up, I'm getting them ready. I'm feeding them breakfast. I take them to school at 8 o'clock. I work from 8:30 to 4:30, and then I get home at 5. I don't do real estate. I got to feed my family. So between my wife and I, we figure out dinner. We're hanging out with the kids. Our kids go to bed right around 8:15. And then from then all the way to 9, I'm with my kids. At 9 o'clock, I spend about an hour and a half with my wife. 9 to 10, 9 to 10:30. Drink a glass of wine, have some tea, have some dessert. She likes to watch her TV shows, Emily in Paris, whatever else she watches, Grey's Anatomy, right? Whatever it is, right? At 10:30, this is how this all started. 10:30, we would go to bed. I would lay in bed next to her until she fell asleep. And she knew this. At about 11:15, 11:30, I would get back up out of bed. And I would go back to my desk. and I would continue learning and learning and learning. I would go to sleep a lot of nights at like 1 a.m. But remember, I have to get back up at 4:10. And so early on, I would just grind. Like there's a way. A lot of people say, I don't have time. I don't have education. I don't know anyone. You can figure it out. And so I figured it out. I fit it into my schedule where I could to make sure that it didn't interfere with my life as a husband, my life as a dad, my life as an employee. And then I just fit in those little pockets. And so it was a lot of YouTube University, 100%. Is it okay to just shout out some of the channels I learned from?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So Investors, Mel and Dave, I think they're from Canada, but they taught me a ton about seller financing. Jerry Norton taught me a ton about seller financing. And then honestly, just recently, probably in the last year to 18 months, I started learning about and from his videos. Pace Morby, that was more recently. But I would just do a lot of YouTube. So I got some basic education and kind of the verbiage and the language that was important to me. And then what I would do is maybe unconventional, but I started calling real estate attorneys and title companies. And I would just pitch them what I wanted to do. And I would pay the attorneys their hourly fee. And it would literally sound like this. Hey, John, my name is Austin Largusa. I'm getting into real estate, and I want to see if there's a way I can buy homes without banks. Can you tell me if this makes sense? And I would run a scenario to John. And then based on whatever John said, I would take notes, and I would say, hey, John, thank you for your time. We would hang up. I would take all that information. I would find another real estate attorney. Hey, Kyle, my name is Austin Largusa. I'm looking to get into real estate. I want to buy houses without banks. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help me? And he would, the attorney would walk through. Hey, you can try this. You could try that. Hang up, pay them their fee. I would call title companies. Same thing. Hey, ABC Title Company, my name is Austin. I want to do this transaction. I think it's called seller financing. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help me? And they would laugh because it's like almost the most honest and most humble pitch ever. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help me? Right? They would giggle and then they would listen. All right, what are you looking to do? How can we help? And that's really how I started to understand how all these deals needed to be structured. Right? I would do the same thing when I started hearing about other people doing creative deals. Hey, my name is Austin. I want to do these deals. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help me? And it's the most humbling experience because you're coming to someone saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me. But honestly, I feel like it's the most beneficial approach for you. The mistake I think a lot of people take when they're trying to learn stuff is they come into it as if they already know what they're talking about when they should be in the position of student, right? They want to be like student teacher. They're like, no, hold on. You need to learn. Just be the student and embrace being the student. And so YouTube University, 100%. I would call real estate attorneys. I would call title companies. I'd call other investors. I would call agents and brokers and just pitch this idea that I knew had to exist somewhere. And then I started formulating how we were going to go ahead and help those 1,000 families to become homeowners rather than home renters. Sorry, that was like a super long answer, but I hope it helped.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Absolutely. Sorry, I got a question I got to ask, John. I hate to interrupt you, but I guess it's more of a comment more than anything, because that what you talked about with people saying that, approaching a conversation, especially because I know John does, and you probably get a lot of people reaching out to you saying, hey, I want to talk about this, or I want to talk about that. Maybe people you don't even know. And they come at you in a way where it's like, I already have all the answers. I just need you to verify that what I'm saying is correct. It drives me nuts. It's like, well, you probably don't have all of the answers if you're trying to verify your information. And that's totally okay.
Right.
For the people listening, that's okay if you don't have all the answers. Just approach it a little bit different, maybe a little less arrogant, and you're going to get way better response. And I can't imagine what doing all those things you were talking about, title companies and other investors, what it did for your network, because our network is so super important. But now you've made relationships with, first of all, you made friends with the investors. You have sources of information from the investors. Now you've got title companies who are on board who can also provide you things like a list of potential investments for you at a later
100%.
time. There's all of these things are twofold. So every single action that you take there's going to be a reaction to that, right? And now they know your name, which is a really big piece of that. And they might think of you when a deal comes up that you were just talking about, in that same subject anyways. So that's really big. So did it do a lot for your network, all these things? Did you see a change in your business from making these contacts?
What's funny, Kyle, is there are some people who follow me on Instagram who've been watching what I've been doing for the last couple of years, like people that I've asked for help from, right? Who I got onto social media and I was like, man, they're doing it big. They've got 1,000 followers. They must know what they're doing. And now what's crazy is they're able to see the journey and we'll talk about it. And they'll say, like, Austin, remember when you reached out to me and asked me for help? Now I'm calling you and asking you for help. And so we've just created these relationships over the course of a few years. And, I got into real estate probably at the best time, I think, right? The end of 2019, right before the pandemic shut everything down. And so it made building relationships online and over the phone normal, right? And so now it's really cool. It's really cool because I've developed these relationships with investors over Instagram in other states and different parts of the country. And now we're working on deals together where I came in as, hey, I have no clue. Can you just help me out? I just got 2 questions. Now we're working on closing deals together. It's insane. Yes, it's helped my network 100% because now they know what kind of person I am. They know what kind of character I have, that I'm not just going to try to run everyone over, that I'm a collaborator and I'm all about teamwork. So, yep, 100%, Kyle.
I love that. And I think, we talk about real estate as buildings and property and all that stuff, but it is a people to people business. And you have to get on with people to do that. And that's super interesting that you've had that experience. And for me, I've spoken to a lot of realtors particularly and just been humble and been like, hey, I'm looking at this. I like this property. I'm not sure about this. And I've had real estate agents walk through a property, video it for me and tell me about the property and say, we totally get you're probably not going to buy this, but we love the fact that was your intro. It's like, hey, I don't really think I'm going to buy this, but this is the kind of thing I'm interested in. So be humble and be curious and don't waste people's time. But also, you can't waste people's time more by pretending you're a big shot and you're going into to close business. One of the things I'm interested in is kind of your first deal and then your kind of, your feed of deals or funnel of properties and how that came about and kind of how you interact with agents.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got our first rental in Clarksville, Tennessee. It's about 35 minutes northwest of Nashville. And I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we bought it in a remote market. I've never been to Tennessee ever in my life. I've never been to any of the states where my rentals are. It was the pandemic, right? We were like, we'll figure it out. And so we got it in Clarksville, Tennessee. We found it on Facebook Marketplace from a wholesaler. And it was actually the best scenario for us because he had already structured the deal. So he had all the terms lined up. And they were it was a loose agreement, which allowed for some negotiations. But what it really did was it taught me how you can structure a deal without a bank and what numbers or what terms you can play with between you and the seller. And so the wholesaler had the deal listed on Facebook Marketplace. I reached out, and basically over the course of, I think it was 6 weeks, we settled on a purchase price of $130,000, right? That's a total purchase price for a 3-1, 1,100 square feet. At closing, we were to give the seller $14,000, and the seller was going to finance the rest of the mortgage balance at 3.25% for 5 years. Our mortgage payment is $600.24. And right now we rent that out for $1,250. Now, what's different from the way we do it, and we'll kind of jump into it a little more later on, is the way that we rent out homes. Our deal structure basically defers all maintenance, repairs, and capital expenditures to the tenant. And so, when people are talking about cash flow and then you ask them, is that gross or net? And then their net cash flow is a lot lower than they advertise. When I say that our cash flow is $649.76, I mean, our net cash flow is literally $649.76, because the way we do it, everything's deferred to the tenant. So that was my first deal. My second deal, John, was also from social media and also in the Clarksville area. So the first one was seller finance, where the seller becomes the bank. The second one was called a subto, or subject to the existing mortgage, where we gave the seller $18,000 to take over. Let me take that back. We gave the seller $18,000 to pay their mortgage payment on their behalf. In both of those deals, we take title to the property, which means we control the asset and we own the asset. But there is a lien in the first one with the seller. He's financing. And the second one, we're paying the mortgage company. So both of those I got on social media from Instagram and Facebook. Yeah. Any other? I don't know how deep you want me to go into those two deals.
I think that's a great segue into really kind of the deal structure of your entire business. You know, what it is that you're doing and how you're helping these people. I'd love to hear what you're doing with deferring the maintenance and the CapEx and all those items to the renter. I'd love to know how you're structuring that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the first one in Clarksville. $130,000 purchase price, $14,000 to the seller, a mortgage payment of $600.24. So what we do is we lock in that deal. And then what we'll do on the back end when we place a tenant is we'll place them in what's called a lease option, or a lease with an option to purchase. You can think of it kind of like rent to own, but it's a little different as far as how it's structured, but kind of the same concept. So a lot of people have never heard of a lease option, but they've heard of rent to own. So when we bought the house, we bought it for $130,000. For 5 years. And so what we do when we placed our tenant is we said, all right, we'll sell you this house for $185,000 for 4 years, right? So over the course of 4 years, we're going to finance it to you. And at the end of those 4 years, you've got to go get your own mortgage through a bank for $185,000. Now, here's what separates us from the rest of like rent to own companies or companies who do something like this, is when you buy a house from us, there's two stipulations that are in the paperwork. Number one is you have to enroll in Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. And so we find like a local nonprofit that's running the group, a local church that's running the group, and you have to enroll. It's part of the agreement. The reason for that is a lot of people just don't have a sense of financial literacy. And that's why they're unable to buy a house a lot of times. And so we said, all right, well, if that's the case, we're not just going to give you something, we're going to help equip you. Because I don't want this to be the only house they buy. I want them to outgrow this house and learn to sell a house and then be appealing and be attractive to a bank so that they can buy another one after that. So number one is Financial Peace University. I have not found any other company that requires these things in their paperwork. The second thing is that my wife and I will pay out of our own pocket to enroll the person or the persons in a credit repair program. We will pay. It comes out of our profit. Again, because at some point we want them to be attractive to a lender so they can go ahead and secure their own financing. And so it's not about giving people houses. It's about educating people and giving them the financial literacy that they need to be successful, right? You'll see there's a lot of companies that are out there that are rent-to-own companies, and honestly, they're super predatory because they know they can take advantage of families who have fallen on a hard time. That's not our goal. Our goal isn't that we do this lease option with you, Kyle, and then you can't perform on the agreement. Our goal is for you to actually buy the house. like we actually want to help 1,000 families own homes. And so we buy it where the seller finances it or where we can pay the seller's mortgage payment on their behalf. And then we do a lease option and we help educate them on how they can become more attractive to a lender and look for different factors that a lender's looking at.
So I love the idea of lease options. I haven't actually done one. I attempted one as a purchaser one time, and then I was going to flip around and try to sell it in the same sort of thing. The deal ended up not going through. Most of what I got is seller financing and also traditional bank financing. So just to go through your structure one more time for the listeners, You find a house where you've got some sort of creative financing as an option for as a purchaser. So you want to find a seller who's willing to seller finance deals to you. And are you doing? You said 14,000 down, so it sounds like a 10% down payment on this. Is that right on this one?
Yeah, this one was like 10.8%.
Okay, gotcha. And what type of terms are you getting with the seller on your first note?
So the first one was 3.25% interest, amortized over 30 years for 5 years.
Excellent. And then so you go out and you do you find somebody who's looking for a lease option as a buyer. What does that structure look like? Other than just signing up a lease, do you put a lease, like an option fee in there where they have to give you a down payment at the beginning of it? So if they don't exercise their option in that 4 years, that's what they surrender. How does that work on the buyer side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how we do it. So we require an option fee. We usually market the property as 3 tiers, right? So a low cash down option, a medium cash down option, and then a higher cash down option. And based on whichever tier you can hit, then we have a higher monthly payment, a medium monthly payment, and a lower monthly payment, as well as a higher purchase price, a medium purchase price, and a lower purchase price. Now, what we do is, so if we have a 5-year term when we buy the house, and we get someone in for a lease option, we'll do a 4-year term. And the reason we do that is our goal is to sell the house, but in the event that they can't exercise that option to purchase for whatever reason, we still have a year to figure out what we want to do with the asset. And so we always create some margin and a buffer. But yes, we do require an option fee up front. That option fee is non-refundable. What it allows us to do is to, and this is just adding more layers, is to pay back our private lenders because we borrow a lot of private money. And so it allows us to do that. We do have our monthly payments 20 to 25% above market rents. And so we cash flow a little higher than your usual long-term rental. And then what we'll do is we'll consider, if you have a 4-year term with us, we'll account for very basic conservative 4% appreciation year over year, which isn't high comparatively to the last couple of years. It's been a lot higher in different markets. But we'll consider 4% appreciation, and then we'll back off a year. And the reason we want to back off a year is because we actually want the buyers to walk into equity, right? We want them to walk into a position where it's advantageous for them. I don't need to get all the money in the deal. I don't need to squeeze that thing till it's dry. I just need to make a little bit to make my time worth it. And then I want to help you buy the house.
Can you confirm what back off a year means for people like me?
Yeah. So so John, if I'm selling you the house on a lease option and we say 4-year term, what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate 3 years of appreciation at 4%. Right? So I won't do a full 4 years. I'm going to say, "Hey, this is what it could be, but let me give you a little more equity and come back a year."
Oh, now I did it with the mic. Silly thing. Okay, so I'm curious about your clients, essentially, the people who lease these places. How do you vet somebody who's right for this structure? Because this structure is definitely not right for everybody, for as far as being a person who would be the lessee, I guess. So what type of a person would this benefit? And how do you make sure that they fit in your model? And you know, it's really difficult to tell whether or not in 4 years from now this person's going to exercise their option. And obviously you want this to be their new home so that you can move on to the next deal. And so how do you vet somebody?
Yeah, great question. So we do all our marketing on Facebook Marketplace. That's 100% to find these lease option tenant buyers. What we'll do is we'll run them through our background check, which we do through avail.co. And it's great. It shows us everything we need to see. But what's most important for us is that there's consistent income regardless of where it's from. I don't care if you're self-employed, 1099, which is what most people who have trouble working with banks are, right? Self-employed, 1099, contracting jobs make it difficult for lenders to say, okay, we can rely on that income. Because I own the house, I don't have the same regulations that a bank has or the same guidelines. And because my intention is for you to buy the house and to help you, I'm a little more lenient. My wife says I'm soft when it comes to helping families. I've got a soft spot in my heart for people who want to make a difference, for their family. And so we will run through a background check, income verification and all that. We do we do require 3 times income of the monthly payment. So I know a lot of people do 2.5, but we do 3 because there's a little more risk for us. And the biggest thing is I just need to see income. Here's the reality. Let's say during the pandemic, someone was laid off. They couldn't make their mortgage payments. The mortgage relief or whatever the lender thought they were going to do to help them didn't work because the person didn't know they were just going to tack on the rest of that amount owed that was forgiven. They didn't realize that they were just going to tack it on at the end. They go into pre-foreclosure because they got laid off. They lose their house. 7 years, they can't go to a bank. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that they got laid off during the pandemic. And so there's a lot of situations like that where people get laid off for whatever reason, and the banks won't look at them because now they're super strict after the recession in 2008-9. And so that's where we come in and we're able to help families like that.
That's amazing. And I think it's those kind of variables or those kind of pieces of how this works, which is really interesting. I've done some reading on lease to own and the kind of the other side of seller financing, that side rather than the option side. What was the learning to kind of get to that point? What did that look like? Was that just from YouTube University, or was there kind of a process you went through?
I wish I had a more sexy answer. I literally did the same thing. I found people who were doing it, called them, same script. Hey, my name's Austin. I want to do this thing called lease options. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help me? I talked to attorneys again. Now for the disposition side of it, right? I had to talk to the attorneys to figure out how to acquire them without banks. Now I have to talk to attorneys to figure out how to sell them without banks. I had to talk to title companies. What do you guys need to see? Does it have to close through a title company? Or can it just be an agreement with me and John? Right? A lot of things that I had to learn. I'm a big believer in knowing what you're good at and being okay with knowing that you're not good at everything. I think that's one of my biggest strengths. And so where I'm not competent, I'm just going to go to the professionals. I'm not going to waste my time watching hours of videos on YouTube or asking people on social media forums, although they could be helpful. I'm going to go to the professionals. They deal with this stuff on a daily basis, and I'm not the first person they've talked to.
And I'm curious, how's your wife play into this? It sounds like you and your wife possibly work fairly close together. Is she the boss? Does she run the business with you? Yeah, right. Is she running the business with you? Or are you guys independent? How does that work?
Yeah, so oh man, we'll see if she listens to this podcast later on. We have a hard time working together, my wife and I. We butt heads a lot, and so what we decided early on was that I was going to run with this, with one stipulation: I can't lose us money. That was the only rule she gave me. Don't lose us money. Okay, fine. So I started running with it. Now we've grown our business a little bigger, and we're considering, it's a consideration, if she comes on and becomes our first full-time employee. Because again, I still have a W-2. I'm working. She's working. But we're considering if she quits her job and comes on as our first full-time employee.
And then you'll really know how you guys work together. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of this process, and we talk a lot about wins, and real estate online social media tends to talk a lot about wins. What are your biggest kind of wins and losses, or I guess the other way to say it is, what are your kind of biggest, proudest achievements and the hardest lessons learned?
Yeah, I would say I'm super low maintenance. I get excited over small things. There's a lot of small wins that I'll celebrate, like I won the Super Bowl, but they're just tiny wins. So when we first got started, my first win was that I found a deal. That was that one that I bought for $130,000, and we celebrated. We went out to dinner. Like it was that big of an achievement. And again, because of what I've seen growing up and because I always felt like my ceiling was very low, that was a big deal for me. A lot of people are going to listen to this podcast and think, oh, it was easy to buy a house. You celebrated? Like, you're damn right I celebrated. We went out and had a ribeye and a glass of wine. Like, we celebrated. And I do that constantly because I have to remind myself how to stay encouraged in real estate because it can be really daunting. I don't know about you guys, but it is crushing. I remember the first time I got an offer rejected. I felt like I personally got rejected. Like I felt super offended. And so
it's easy
I make it
to
a
feel
point
that way. It's very easy to feel that way.
Yep. And so I make it a point to celebrate the small things. And so I would say the things that stand out the most is when we placed our first family in our first lease option. That was exciting because up until then, it was just theory, right? It was just, here's an idea, here's a vision. Oh, this sounds great. It sounds great in theory, but can we actually do it? So being able to, there's nothing like the feeling of being on a FaceTime call with a family and looking in their eyes and telling them that they're going to own the home that they're standing in right now. There's nothing like that feeling. This couple moved from Detroit, Michigan to Clarksville, Tennessee for a job. They'd had a really hard time keeping work up there in Detroit. They had a newborn baby, right? Young family. And I could see it in the husband's eyes. He didn't have everything together. He wasn't the most educated person, but he was committed to helping his family. And honestly, it reminded me of sitting in that office at the bank and them telling me that I couldn't buy a house. Because there's something, there's this difference between internal and external motivation. And a lot of people are externally motivated, where they need a paycheck to actually work hard, or they need some other kind of celebration or reward in order to do something. There's an incentive that needs to happen. When I looked at this guy on FaceTime, I could see in his eyes he was internally motivated, that if he had fallen on hard times again, he was going to figure it out. And so when I was able to look at them on FaceTime and say, hey, you guys are going to own that house that you're standing in. We're going to help you own it. We're going to help you with your credit. We're going to help teach you financial literacy. Man, you should have heard the wife scream. There's honestly nothing like knowing that you're helping someone. Nothing.
Absolutely.
I could buy, $1 million house with $5,000 down, and I wouldn't celebrate the same as I celebrated when we helped that first family.
And yeah, that's huge. And it's having a servant attitude and bringing that into this business, into real estate is a pretty rare thing. And I just wish there was more people out there who would approach this business with that sort of goal in mind. That type of person whose cup gets filled up by seeing the smile on somebody else's face. There's not very many people in real estate like that. I mean, why do you think real estate investors have this awful reputation? It's because we're all about money. Give me money, 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 money. But, gosh, there really are some really good people out there, like yourself, and really good investors out there who are genuinely in this to make the world a better place. And so for those of you listening, please think about what your piece of that is, and don't just do this for the money. Because if it's the money that you're going after, it's not going to make you happy. You're after what the money might do for you, perhaps, which is, give you all those different types of freedom that you might be able to get, but the money's not going to solve that. So I guess trying to move it along, we're trying to be, pretty mindful of your time. I'm curious, it seems to me like it would be impossible for anything to go wrong. So I'm assuming probably all of these different places that you've bought, you've never had anything happen on the negative side, right?
Nope, never. Never had an issue.
Yeah, right.
No,
if there was, maybe you wouldn't mind sharing one of those things and maybe a lesson learned for our listeners.
Yeah, hypothetically speaking, if there was ever a horror story. Yeah, I can share one. So let's go back to that first family. We got them in the house, super excited, right? We were getting constant communication with them. I would contact him. I would send him a text about every other week and just tell him and just, affirm him. Dude, you're a great husband. You're a great dad. Keep going. Keep working hard, man. Right? All of these things. And it was going great until I got a phone call that the whole underneath of their house was flooded. Right? In Tennessee, it just so happened that like 2 months later, after we placed that family, there was a huge storm. Which was not fun at all. And so he calls me. He says, "Hey, I know in our agreement that I'm supposed to take care of everything, but here's what's happening." And the whole underneath of the house, the crawl space was flooded. So we got someone out there to look at it. And what had happened was in the backyard, it was graded, like the whole neighborhood was graded to the lowest point at the house that we placed the family in. So there was this giant empty field behind his house, the house that he got into, and it was graded down to the crawl space. So all the rain, all the runoff had flowed all the way to the crawl space. The whole bottom was flooded. So we called someone out there, a mold remediator, to look at what was happening. The bill ended up being about $6,000. Now, legally, I could have easily said, well, dude, you signed the paperwork. You knew what the agreement was. Take care of it. But my wife and I just felt like, hey, we just got them into this house. I can see the hunger in his eyes. They're good people. Let's help them. So we ended up coming out of pocket, paying for it, right? This was mold remediation. This was also digging out the trenches and making sure that the runoff flows a different way and doesn't end up at the bottom of the house again. This was installing, they installed this fan under the house to make sure it stays dry in every season. And I call that a loss or a horror story because it was $6,000 that we hadn't allocated towards an emergency fund, a contingency fund. This is $6,000 out of our savings account that we allocated to this house. It was a loss in a sense, but what we were able to do was say, all right, here's your monthly payment. It's $1,250. Let's write an addendum that says your monthly payment's going to be $1,325 until this is paid off. And so all we had to do was increase his rent a little bit. Nothing crazy. He's still paying it off right now. Nothing crazy, but just so we can start recouping some of that money back. So as a financial loss, and if you're listening on this podcast, you just got to plan for the what ifs, because those what ifs never tell you they're coming. That's why they're called what ifs. You just plan for it ahead of time. That was a big loss. I think another one that was really hard was I was working with an agent, and this actually happened this week. I was working with an agent on a house that we're buying in Las Vegas, and we came to terms. We figured it out. Everything was going well until the seller emailed me and was asking, basically he was asking, can you send over the earnest money for the house, and can it go hard today, even though you haven't walked through? No, this is where I went wrong. Obviously, if you've been in real estate for any period of time, you know that earnest money is not going to go hard on day one. Rarely, ever. Maybe a little more often in like commercial multifamily. It's a little shorter period, but not in residential. It doesn't happen that fast. I took it personally. I took it very personally. I sent a very professional email that we're going to cancel the contract. But the issue was this: the agent that I was working with to represent me, it didn't tarnish her reputation, but it definitely hit her reputation, because now the seller's broker, who's been in the game a lot longer and knows a lot more people in the industry, is going around saying, don't work with her because her and her team and her clients are unprofessional. And so it wasn't a direct thing from me that it hurt me, but it hurt the people that I'm working with. And I treat my team like family, where it wasn't necessarily our fault per se. It still hurt her reputation. And so that to me would be probably the biggest, I don't know what you want to call it, horror story per se.
Boy, I'd almost, I don't know all the pieces of this story, but I would be pointing a lot of fingers at that seller for reaching out to you directly and for any reason. It's the whole purpose
100%.
That's the whole purpose of having representation by your real estate brokers, is because when people do that sort of thing, that kills deals, and
Yep.
I think that maybe that listing broker needs to point the finger back at himself for flying off the handle. That just seems Seems kind of ridiculous. I did have one question I wanted to back up just for a second, because we talked at the beginning about this when you talked about all the maintenance, all of the repairs, all the CapEx stuff falls on your tenants or your clients or whatever you want to call them. And you mentioned that with the story you told a little bit ago about the low point with all the water. How do you do that? Because in most landlord-tenant laws, the landlord is responsible, and you're technically a landlord as long as you're through that lease period. Do you go to an attorney in order to get the right language put together that this is actually a long-term purchase? How do you set this up so that you're following the letter of that law?
Yeah. Again, I said earlier, where I'm not as competent, I'm going to go to the professionals. Yes, I had to go to the attorney to make sure that the language is in there to understand, as the tenant/buyer, you're responsible for all maintenance, repairs, and capital expenditures to the house. So that's in the agreement. That's in the paperwork. That's in the conversations that we have. We make sure that they know, like, hey, if a light bulb goes out, legally, you can't call me to fix it. You've got to take care of that. Either you do it yourself or you hire that out. Hey, if something's up with the toilet, you've got to take care of that. It's not on me. Here's why we do that. Not only do we want people to sign a paper that says they're going to own a home, we want them to feel the weight of responsibility in owning a home. And so this is almost like a trial period for people, if you want to look at it that way. Hey, you want to buy a house? The bank says you're not ready? Let's get you into this lease option where you feel the weight of responsibility of what it means to own a home. But at the same time, what I've found is that when people have responsibility, they feel more ownership. And so a couple of our other families who have been following, our guidelines and the paperwork to the T, they love where they live. They don't look at us as landlords. We're almost like friends. We just have a relationship, but they look at it as their house. And so they may not legally own it yet, but right here, mentally, they own it. Man, it's theirs. And so they're decorating, they're putting stuff on the walls. I don't know about you guys, but when we first started renting, we would never even hang anything on the walls because we were like, well, I'm not going to be here long. I don't want to hang it and have to pull it down. But our tenants they're hanging stuff everywhere. They'll text me pictures. Hey, we painted this. And I'm like, great, it's your house. I don't care. So yeah, it all has to be included in the language of the agreement.
Amazing. And I want to be conscious of your time. So I have one more question, if you have time, which is, I guess, if you had to start over again, what would be your shortcut, or how would you get started?
I would give you the total generic answer and say, I would never redo anything different because I learned so much from my experience and my journey. I hate that. I absolutely would do something different. 100%. I would start looking on the MLS faster. There's this weird, sexy appeal to go off market for everything. I don't know why. It's it's a big thing in the real estate industry as investors. Oh, find everything off market. I wish I went on market earlier. We've closed more deals and at a higher percentage recently since we started going on market last May than we did for the entirety of our career before that, where we were trying to focus only on off market. So I would have gone to the MLS a lot faster.
Amazing. And Austin, we connected before, and that was something that was really interesting, which is you source a lot of deals through the MLS just by finding stuff that isn't selling and making that connection with the agent, as we covered earlier, and having those frank conversations. It's such an interesting and like you said, a different approach. Is off market is the place to be, right?
Yeah, I would if I have time, I'll give the free steps right now on how to find potential creative leads for free on the MLS. Do we have time for that?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, great. So everyone has access to Redfin. I like Redfin more than Zillow. I like Redfin more than Realtor.com. Their search parameters fit what I'm looking for a lot better. So what I do is I'll go to Redfin, if you have the app or on a browser, figure out what market you want to invest in. And here's what I'm searching for. The first thing you have to do is you have to understand the market that you're investing in. So on the top right of the screen, there's a button, a hyperlink that says Market Insights. So you click on Market Insights, type in the city, and you look at the data that Redfin provides, which is better than anyone else's data. And it's free. look for the average days on market, right? So I know out here in the Bay Area, it was like 6 to 8 at the height of like 2020, 2021. And now we're nearing 45 to 50 days on market. So what I'll do is if I look in the Bay Area, I'm going to go on Redfin. I'm going to look for listings that have been on the MLS for more than 45 days, because that's the pain point already. People are getting impatient. They're getting antsy. They need to sell. Their neighbor Robert told them that they sold in 2 days with 40 offers over ask, and they think they're going to get the same thing, and now they're impatient. So 45 days, more than 45 days. What we're going to do next, this is why I love Redfin. There's an option that you can hit that says price reduced or price reduction. You're going to click that, and you're going to figure out which listings have had a price reduction in the last 14 days. So again, go to the market, figure out average days on market, start searching for listings more than 45 days with the price reduction in the last 14 days. That's our criteria for Redfin. What we then do is we look at the purchase date and price, right? So maybe they bought a house for $350 in 2021, and then we look at today's list price. And what we're looking for, if we subtract those amounts, we're looking for little to no equity. Basically deals where a seller might have to write a check at closing. So we do all that criteria search, we refine our lists, we start making calls. When I call an agent, I'll give you guys 100% verbatim my script right now. You can do this like right after this podcast. Call the agent. Here's my script. Hey, Kyle. My name's Austin. My wife and I are buying some rentals in this area. Would love to hear a little more about this property. Now, I'm noticing a couple of things about it, Kyle. I'm an investor. I'm not going to move in. But I'm noticing that it's been on market for more than 45 days. And I've noticed a couple of price reductions. What's the story? Literally verbatim my script. A couple of things to point out. I say my wife and I, because most real estate investors try to paint them to be bigger than they are. And so they'll say, my partners, my company, our fund, our group. Nobody wants to work with a fund or a group. And honestly, brokers can see right through that. And so I take the very low road and humble approach. It's just my wife and I. We're not some big corporation. We're not a hedge fund. We just want to buy some rentals in the area. I let them know that I know what I'm looking at by sharing. I've noticed it's on the market more than 45 days, and I noticed some price reductions. So I'm adding credibility. Hey guys, I know what I'm looking at. There's a reason I called you. The kicker is you say, what's the story? A lot of people will ask this question. They'll say, it's been on market for longer than 45 days. Why? Why hasn't it sold? As a listing agent, most people will already start feeling offended and they'll start getting defensive, because basically what you're saying is, why aren't you good at your job and why haven't you sold this house? And so we take a very neutral approach. We say, hey, what's the story? When we ask what's the story, a broker can share anything at that point. When we make first contact, our first call with an agent, 2 things we want to do. Number 1, we want at the end of the call, we want to be their best friends. We want them to trust us. We want them to know us and like us. Number 2, we're gathering information. We just want to get as much information as possible. And so it's what's the story? We listen. The broker would tell us all kinds of things. One thing that I teach, we have a small team. There's 4 people who call different listings around the country. One thing I teach them is this. You always find a common enemy that's not the listing agent, right? And so it would sound like this. You know, hey, Kyle, what's the story? And then, Kyle, you'll tell me the story, and I'll say, man, why didn't your seller listen to you and list at that price that you said? We're finding a common enemy, right? Now me and Kyle's like, that's right, I told them. And then I'm like, geez, your client sucks. Like we're building this camaraderie to where like Kyle and I are on the same team now. These are all the secrets.
I love it. No, I love the psychology of this. The psychology of this is brilliant because I mean, you're absolutely right. That's great.
Yep. So it's just find a common enemy. Here's another way you can approach it. They listed the property. It's not going to sell now. Oh, Kyle, man, you know, it's crazy. These interest rates, they just keep going up. Nobody knows when they're going to come back down. And then Kyle's going to say, yeah, man, these interest rates have been really tough. If my client had listed before, then we probably would have sold by now. And now our common enemy is the interest rate. Now we're working together, Kyle. Kyle represents the seller, but what he doesn't know is that I'm making him represent me because now we're on the same team. Kyle here's what I'm talking about. He says, man, this guy knows what he's doing. Yes, the interest rates suck. The interest rate is the bad guy. That's the enemy. I'm going to help him buy this house. So we get to that. We hang up, right? I never make an offer on the first call. That's the mistake of a lot of investors. They try to buy on the first call. It's like trying to kiss on the first date. My wife would have slapped me if I tried it. And so you just want information and you just want to build rapport. At the end of the call, here's the gold. We get all the information out. Hey, Kyle, I'm going to follow up with you on Friday. I think this is very important language. I think this might be something we might be interested in. Maybe. It's very neutral. It gives a sense of hope, but it's not committing to anything. I think this might be something we can work on together. Maybe. I think my wife might like this one. Can we do a call tomorrow and follow up? I want to talk to her first. Kyle's going to say, sure. We set a time. Right before I hang up, I'm going to say, hey, Kyle, one quick thing. I'm just looking at this deal. I want to think out loud really quick. If your seller sells at this list price, their potential profit margin is going to be X. And you can figure that out by the list price minus what the client bought it for. That's going to be in the ballpark. And Kyle will agree. Yep, that's going to be their profit margin. I say, okay, and you have a 2.5%, 3% commission. And if a buyer's agent comes in, they have a 2.5%, 3% commission. That's about 6%. So now their profit margin goes down to this. Kyle's going to agree. Yep, they could potentially go down to this. Man, they're losing money now, Kyle. And then closing costs, 2.4% of the purchase price. Now their profit margin isn't anywhere near what they think they're going to sell it for. Kyle, is your client volunteering to lose money? Kyle's going to pause because Kyle's probably never had anyone ask him that question. And then Kyle's going to look at the numbers and he's going to say, well, I mean, it looks like they might. And I'm going to come back in. Again, I'm not saying that I'm the pro at this. I'm not trying to overstep my boundaries. I'm just thinking out loud. Man, Kyle, that sucks for your seller. And even if they were to make a profit, Kyle, and this is just special situations based on how long it's been from when they bought the house and when they sell, even if they do sell at this price, Kyle, don't they have to pay capital gains taxes on any profit they make? Because we target homes that have been purchased within the last 2 years, because we know that certain loan types and certain loan products, if you sell within 5 years without having lived in the house for 2 years, you have to pay capital gains taxes. All stuff that I've researched and learned. Hey, even if they profit, they're going to have to pay capital gains taxes. And Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but that could be up to 40% of all their profit. Yeah, you're right. Right. And so now Kyle and I, right, I've already built enough rapport to talk to him like this. I've spent enough time investing in our rapport that I can present him with just facts. Hey, Kyle, it looks like if I'm doing my math right, your client's probably going to walk out at a loss to sell a house. And honestly, I don't want your seller to have to do that. And so, Kyle, tell me if this would make sense. I just want to think out loud for a second. If there was a scenario that we could figure out where your client made a net gain at closing, I could give them cash at closing. If there was a scenario where I could pay your commission and I could pay all closing costs associated with the transaction, do you think your seller would be interested in that? Listen, any good broker or agent is going to say yes, because I'm basically saying I'm going to pay your client, I'm going to pay you, and I'm going to pay for closing costs. When they say, well, yeah, usually they'll say, what do you mean? Tell me more. And I don't tell them more. At that point, I say, hey, let me think about it for a little more, and let's do our call tomorrow. And then we hang up. I'm leaving them on the edge. I'm basically pitching a sub-2 without saying sub-2. And this is where a lot of investors make a mistake. Investors, we like to use big words and real estate jargon because it makes us feel better about ourselves. Like, I know what I'm talking about. ARV. Yeah. Like, nobody cares about the words and the terms you use. There was a study done about national politics speeches in correlation to reading grade levels. And so if we look at it, right, they did the study on Ben Carson, Robert DeSantis, and Donald Trump. And they assigned a certain a grade reading level to each person's speech based on the kind of words that they use. Ben Carson, I think he was speaking at it was like a 7th or 8th grade reading level. Robert DeSantis, the governor of Florida, was at I think it was 5th or 6th grade reading level. Donald Trump was at a 3rd grade reading level. Do the research, Google it. Now, you're probably laughing as you're listening to this podcast, but here's why it's important. Out of all three of them, who could move someone emotionally with a speech, whether good or bad? Donald Trump. The reason he's able to cause you to have any kind of emotion is because he speaks at a level that you can understand. And so when I explain creative financing to an agent, because a lot of it's education, I talk to them like I would have to explain to my 9-year-old son. Not demeaning or condescending, but I'm using simple words that we all use. And so when I don't say, hey, would your client be open to a subto? The agent has no clue what you're talking about. But if I say, would your client be open to a scenario where I pay them, I pay you, and I pay for closing costs, would your client be interested? Well, of course they'd be interested. And then we follow up, and that's where we talk about the finer terms of the deal. But that right there is 100% our lead generation flow and how we get deals under contract. Everything after that is just negotiating terms.
Wow, and there's value right there, Kyle.
Absolutely.
Where else do you get that?
I love it. Right? You have to start charging people to listen to this podcast. we'll kick you back some, Austin.
Yeah, we got to pay Austin, right? We just sat here.
Oh, no. Yeah, pay us. We'll pay him. It's okay.
Austin, unbelievable, and that's a great end to this conversation, and I think the start of another one. I think we say this a lot, and we're going to be getting guests back on, and we certainly want you to be in that contingent. We'd love to get you back on and deep dive some case studies and that kind of stuff. Would be
absolutely
super.
Would love to come back around, man.
Austin, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your input, and the information. I think people are going to get a lot out of this.
Yeah, I hope so. And I would say this, if you guys have any questions, send me a DM on Instagram. I literally answer every single message I get. I remember when I first got started, how many people helped me. And so I just want to return the favor. Whatever questions you guys have, I'll try to make time to, either send you a typed out message or a voice memo, but I will respond to every single message.
And, Austin, if you could share the other ways of people contacting you, your website and things like that.
Yeah, you can go to the website. It's the website's more geared towards agents or sellers who are having a hard time selling, but that's simplerealestate.org. Most of my business honestly happens through Instagram. It's at my first and last name, Austin Largusa.
And we'll put a link in the show notes as well to all of those things and some other resources and maybe some other YouTubers we mentioned as well. Austin, thank you so much for your time today. It's an absolute pleasure, and I know Carl enjoyed it too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Austin. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for bringing me on, guys.
And we'll be back next week.
Thank you for listening to the Investories podcast. We all have a story. What's yours? The Investories podcast.